Good morning, everyone. The Wednesday, September 5th meeting of the Nags Head Board of Commissioners will come to order. If you'll please join me in a brief moment of silence. And now, as you're able, if you'll please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we move to the agenda, I'd like to welcome our substitute attorney this morning, Mr. Robert Hobbs, former Nags Head resident and neighbor of ours. So nice to have you here, Robert.
Thank you.
The first item on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda, and a motion would be in order.
So moved.
I have a motion, and I'll take two motions. I'll take one of those as a second. So I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All of those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. We have an agenda. The next item on our agenda would be recognitions. Cliff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I'd like to call on Public Works Director Ralph Burrell to introduce new employee, Public Works Maintenance Technician Bruce Erickson.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce Bruce Erickson. Bruce grew up in Virginia, but he currently resides in Nags Head with his wife, Lisa, and his two daughters. He's lived in Nags Head for 25 years, so he didn't have to have much training on where things were in the town. Bruce loves to do anything that has to do with the outdoors. He loves to go to the beach with his family and enjoy the Outer Banks. So without any further ado, Bruce, thank you for being here.
Okay.
Next, we have Interim Police Chief Perry Hale to come forward to introduce the newest police officer, Mr. Trevor Bruce.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Guess I'm diving right in since the chief just retired last week for the first Board of Commissioners meeting. But I stand here before you today to introduce our newest officer to join the department, Trevor Bruce. Trevor is originally from Annapolis, Maryland, and moved here with his family in 2006. He resides in Kitty Hawk and graduated from First Flight High School in 2014. With a lot of hard work and dedication during his junior year, he was successfully completed the program to become an Eagle Scout. Trevor came to Nags Head requesting sponsorship to attend BLET and successfully completed this program in May of this year with top overall academics and top physical fitness for his class. Trevor enjoys working out, helping with the Boy Scouts, and working with youth groups at his church during his time off. As we can all see that Trevor likes to work out, I might ride him around as my personal bodyguard. But I have to say, during BLET's PT assessments, the candidates and recruits have to complete a baseline for their PT assessment. The recruit that finished right before Trevor got up in line felt pretty good about himself, and he had a max bench press of 225 pounds, and it was said that he left the bench, just stretching and feeling good and with his chest bowed out, and Trevor came up next, and the instructor asked him what he wanted to warm up with, and when Trevor was told it was 225 pounds on the bar, he told him just leave that and he'd go from there. So without any further ado, Trevor, welcome to Nags Head.
Nice when you can compel compliance, but just by getting out of the car.
Yes.
The next, the Deputy Fire Chief Shane Height come forward to recognize firefighter EMT Hayden Poulin on his 10 years of service with the town.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. I'd like to recognize firefighter EMT Hayden Poulin today for 10 years of dedicated service to the town of Nags Head. Hayden has been with us a total of 10 years, but he has a total of 19 years in the fire service. Hayden currently resides in Currituck County with his wife Tara and their 3 children. Tara couldn't be with us today. She is a member of public safety family as a police officer in the town of Duck. Hayden is an asset to the town, serving as a driver operator, fire inspector, fire instructor, and an acting company officer as needed. Hayden also serves the town of Duck and the lower Currituck fire departments, where he's an active volunteer firefighter. Hayden is always ready to assist anyone in need and plays a very active role in training and bringing ideas and suggestions to us that help with our daily operations. Hayden, I'm extremely proud to work with you, and we all appreciate the hard work that you do not only for the fire department but for the community. Congratulations on 10 years.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comment, and as our custom, I will turn that over to our attorney, Mr. Robert Hobbs.
At this time, if you have any comments to make, if you'll come forward and state your name and address, please. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Buster Nunemaker, and I reside at 2600 South Pilot Lane in Nags Head Acres. I stand before you today because I am feeling frustrated by the lack of immediacy the town has shown in addressing our drainage problems that have been going on for over 20 years. Myself and 7 others were asked to serve on a drainage committee to help identify and provide solutions to many of the problems. We have done our job along with the town staffs, and I appreciate the efforts of the town staffs. Problem, excuse me. Okay. Problem areas have been identified and plans of actions have been planned, but, and this is a big but, the amount of funding seems to be dragging this out for more than another 20 years. Thank you for the $235,000 that you put in this year's budget with a 1-cent tax increase, but $235,000 is just not enough money to address the needs of the drainage problems that we have in this town. Thank you for hearing our committee's concerns, but I encourage you to not treat this as just another project, which I feel, along with other members of the committee, that it is being treated that way. Immediacy is the key. This situation needs to be treated like it is an emergency, because it is. Residents are suffering with loss of property, some that occur with each rain event. Please open the door and excel the 13 projects that have been identified and put some serious funding towards getting all of these projects completed in a very timely manner. I would also ask you to consider putting a moratorium on buildable lots in the areas identified by our committee and the town staffs, so as to not create more problems for our residents. And one does exist already because of about 3.5 to 4 foot of fill that has been put on the property. And the lady that sits immediately to the north of that property is sitting in this room today and can tell you even more if she wants to speak. Let's open these closed ditches and pump water to accomplish our identified drainage goals. I want to thank you for your time. I've had 4 text messages since our meeting of this past week from members of the committee. I'm speaking for myself today, but I can read those text messages to you and you'll see the same frustration in the voices of those people. They're tired of seeing this get dragged on and on and on, and $235,000 is just not enough money to address the problems. The engineering for just this year is over $200,000. So I ask you to open those doors and look again at this problem. This water is not going to go anywhere unless we move it, unless we put some serious funding in there, as we're doing with beach nourishment. These are the residents of this town, the people that elect you and that elected me many years ago to sit on this board. And I look at you today because I know that you hear what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next person who'd like to speak, please. Come forward, state your name and address.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Appreciate your time this morning. I'm Karen Brown, the President and CEO of the Outer Banks Chamber of Commerce, and I'm just here today to read into public comment a letter that we'd like to leave with all of you with just a recommendation to consider some items that we have. Dear Nags Head Board of Commissioners, the housing crisis on the Outer Banks is real. Help wanted signs are seen everywhere, and we hear from businesses daily about their inability to find workers. This is not just a seasonal challenge, it has become a year-round one. Professional jobs go unfilled at our hospital and in our healthcare system. People are hired, yet can't find reasonably priced housing options, so they leave. The community college is trying to offer technical classes, but can't find instructors for the same reasons. The Outer Banks Chamber of Commerce formed a committee in the spring of 2017 to look into the challenge of housing for our community. This includes not only seasonal workforce housing, but year-round rentals and reasonably priced single-family homes. The committee includes stakeholders from around the OBX region. We learned early on that zoning is one of the core issues when it comes to addressing the housing crisis. A number of current zoning ordinances of county and towns make addressing this critical issue difficult. With this in mind, the Chamber and its committees have been reviewing current ordinances to determine where we can create opportunities for private developers to address the housing crisis. Together, we can ensure that our community has the services it needs, backed by skilled, competent, and caring people. And then in the letter, we outlined several items that we've identified that we think, we're going to ask you to direct your planning director or planning board to review some of these requests and see if they are something that you would want to revise. The first one is a couple definitions, is to add a definition for long-term rentals or occupancy as a residential dwelling that is occupied and used for residency and housekeeping purposes for a period of 31 days or more. Add a definition for short-term occupancy as a residential dwelling that is used and/or advertised through online media or any means of advertising for occupancy for a period of 30 days or less. Then for accessory dwelling units, restrict use of accessory dwelling units approved under these new definitions to be used for long-term rentals as defined. Review parking requirements and possibly consider a shared parking agreement. A couple of other options and ideas that we had were consider creating a zoning district or review existing districts for opportunities to include an allowance for duplexes and multifamily homes, or consider incentives, perhaps a density bonus for businesses providing housing units for employees or development of mixed-use projects. Thank you for taking the time to consider this request. This could be the first step in helping to ease that housing crisis that we have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next person who'd like to speak, please. Come forward. Seeing none, Mayor, we'll go ahead and close the session for public comment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hobbs. Appreciate that. The next item on our agenda would be the small wireless facilities ordinance. Cliff?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. The board had asked for attendance from Dominion Energy. Ms. Winnie Wiseman is here with Dominion External Affairs, and she also has a couple representatives with her to address any questions you may have as it pertains to the small cell wireless. We also have, the applicant is here for any further questions, but I believe at this point it's...
Yeah, I'd like to ask Ms. Wiseman to come to the podium, if you would, please. We asked you to be here because some of our board members had questions and concerns about the use of the polls for various purposes, and so I just want, if you, first to let them ask questions and for you to be able to express the company's policy. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, Renee?
Okay, Susie, go ahead.
Susie?
Previously, we were told that absolutely nothing could go on a Dominion power pole except, Dominion power lines, that there could be no attachment for solar lighting or, at a low level or anything. And that was 2 liaisons ago who provided that information to us. And then, of course, this was enacted through the legislature, and only at our last meeting did we discover that they are not intending on using the power poles that are on the ocean side. They're going to go across the street. What is the real policy of Dominion Energy? Can anything go on a power pole? I understand this is, legislation and that Dominion will be compensated for this, but are there any allowances for town use, such as a flag or low-level lighting anywhere on a Dominion pole?
Dominion's policy is no private facilities on our poles. If there was a request from the town to hang a sign, we would probably work with the town to hang a sign, which would be temporary. But as far as lighting, that would be private facilities, and it is not allowed on our poles. I'm going to let the joint use just say something about how Verizon antennas are on the pole. It's regulated by the FCC. So that's how Verizon is putting their antennas on our poles. Does that help?
If you said that no private can go on there, is Verizon considered private?
No,
They're not considered private.
they are not.
And we're not considered private.
The town, yes. Town
We are
is-
considered private.
You are.
Can you give me a list of the private and the non-private?
Probably not off the top of my head, but I could provide you with that list, yes.
Or just a general, okay, Verizon is not private.
Verizon.
Can you name 2 other things that aren't private?
CenturyLink, MediaCom,
So
Comcast.
communicate, so basically anything the FCC says is what you go by.
Correct.
Commissioner Cahoon?
One other question as it relates to private versus non-private. Streetlights, people can request streetlights from Dominion that are put on their poles. They then pay Dominion a fee for those poles.
Correct.
So in other words, could the town request the same?
Absolutely, they
And we do.
could.
We have a number of poles, but one of our goals is to try to light up pathways for public safety. And that was one of the issues that we were trying to talk with Dominion about. So is Dominion willing to talk with the town about lighting for pathways and something other than really high lights?
I'm sorry, you said.
High-profile
you want
lights versus low-profile.
Like LEDs.
No, I'm saying high-profile lighting such as at the top of the pole versus lower-profile lighting, which is still a public purpose.
Yes, we would work with the town in installing lights on poles. Now, we do have standards for our lights as far as height on the poles.
So in other words, really no low-level lighting would
No
be.
low level, no.
Does Dominion have standards for maintaining lights once they're put up?
Absolutely.
So if they're rusting and falling off, Dominion is proactive about removing them?
Yes, ma'am, we are.
Took a fire truck for me to even get a Dominion pole repaired. I could stick my hand through the pole. And Dominion kept saying it was okay. So I want to just qualify the standards.
Okay. I'll be happy to give you my card. If you have that issue again, you are more than welcome to call me. And we can definitely come and check on poles, lights. Anytime the town has a light out or feels like a pole is unsafe, please call me. Because we certainly do not want any kind of citizens in harm's way.
All right, thank you.
Any others?
I have questions, but not of what I call VEP code.
Okay.
I have one.
Okay, all right, Commissioner Walters.
I'm still struggling with the public-private. I mean, we're a public body, but we are considered private.
That's
in the
correct.
eyes of Dominion. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
I do have one more question.
Okay. Commissioner Cahoon.
Do you have anywhere in your policies a definition of what you consider public versus private other than FCC?
I can certainly investigate and get back with you, and I'll get you a definition.
Okay, because I think under everybody else's definition, the town is a public body, not a private body.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Wiseman? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. If I'll defer to you to how to proceed with questions that Commissioner Fuller may have for the applicant.
Of the applicant?
Of the applicant.
Yeah. If the representative come forward. You don't mind introducing yourself?
Sure, I
again?
will. Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, members of the commission. My name's Steve Romine. I am attorney for Verizon Wireless. I have with me today Colleen Hall and Kelsey Chase as well. Can answer technical questions. Happy to answer any questions. I guess one thing I would like to clarify right up front is that we're really not technically an applicant. We're just here in support of the new ordinance that we hope will get passed. But I'm happy to answer questions. Mr. Fuller.
This past week, the town received a letter from from Verizon. Can you tell me the intent of that letter?
Okay, there were 2 packages delivered, I believe, by Kelsey to Andy Garman. The intent of those letters were to go ahead and submit our applications on the 2 polls that we'd like to be considered through the town process.
Can you give me the full intent of that letter?
I don't know what you're suggesting. State law's in place, and we need to move forward with our applications, and they were submitted in that vein.
Before we developed any rules or regulations, we know we have to allow it,
Yeah.
but we can develop standards by which they're placed.
That's correct.
And so we haven't had a chance to do that yet.
Right.
Because we've been delayed 3 weeks because we haven't had the proper people here to answer some questions. We're now moving into an arena where we can start developing those standards. I felt I received the letter more as an attempt to, if you will, influence us to move quickly, which I think we should do. But I also think we should move deliberately and make sure we go through the process of developing the right ordinances.
I don't disagree with your feelings, Mr. Fuller. I guess the ordinance that the state passed was passed over a year ago, and the adoption of the local ordinance, I guess, started in March, and we've been suggesting or encouraging the town to give us a process that we could file under. If we were trying to circumvent your process, I guess we would just go directly and start installing something, which we haven't done. We obviously submitted to the town and asked that we could get some consideration on our 2 applications.
So you're comfortable then with us moving deliberately to develop those standards, and that the letter you sent wasn't to try to put any undue pressure on us to develop ordinances in our time frame that you would have to follow?
No, well, we have been part of the process. I think Mr. Garman will tell you that we got your ordinance, we sent a fairly exhaustive comment letter in on the actual ordinance. So we've been working on this over 9 months. So I don't think it's been our position that we're trying to bully or push or use undue influence. That wouldn't be the intent. The intent is we're eager to move forward. We try to make the season. We've missed the season, but we're just trying to get our assets deployed. We are incidentally moving forward on 4 sites on North Carolina DOT properties, which were part of the original 7. We had 7 we were trying to build out for the network. And so 4 of them have progressed. 1 is under consideration for a move. The 2 that we're most concerned about that are left are 2 on town right away. So,
Thank you.
so I appreciate that, and no intent to try to push anyone.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Mr. Roman, question. The applications you have pending now with the town, if the town were to go ahead and adopt the ordinance, would Verizon agree to have those applications processed and administered pursuant to the new ordinance?
I think we'd be very amenable to that. The ordinance, I believe, says you have to process in 45 days. I guess if your question is, would we allow the full 45 days from the point of adoption, I would say yes. Do you all have a concern with that?
Okay, thank you.
Again, we're here in support of the ordinance. We weren't here as an applicant. We just were trying to see if we can get the thing moved along and done. I know a couple of the other towns in the Outer Bank have already adopted a similar ordinance. We just didn't want to be delayed any further if we could. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
What is the board's desire? We've had a draft ordinance in the package, and is it the board's desire to take action? Is that appropriate, Cliff, that we would consider that?
Yes, sir.
So I would ask the board, what are your wishes at this point?
I feel like the applicant has continued to act in good faith. My belief is a reason for a lot of the delay has been because of VEPCO. And I'm glad that they were able to come today, although I'm still not satisfied with their answers. But it has nothing to do with what's in front of us.
Okay.
Exactly. So I would move that we approve as presented, as staff recommends.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion to approve and I have a second. So I have a motion and a second to approve the small wireless facilities ordinance. Is there any discussion? Further discussion? All right, in that case, we'll take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda, and a motion would be in order.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
I have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda, I'm sorry, Commissioner Sears?
Can we get Cliff to make sure that Renee gets her business card? Absolutely. All right.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for that reminder, Mike. Appreciate that. The next item on our agenda would be reports and recommendations from the Planning Board and the Planning and Development Director.
That's what you,
Start with Holly White with the Focus Technical Committee update.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Happy to provide an update on the Focus project. The technical committee has met an additional 4 times, I think, since I've last reported, or since July and August. So that's the 31st, the 22nd, of August, the 30th, and again on yesterday. So we've been able to wrap up the supplemental section. We've reviewed draft commercial standards, and we're at a point that we're moving all of this information forward to the consultant to begin drafting the final draft that will come to the joint meeting for the planning board and the Board of Commissioners. So all their materials are available. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Made good progress in the meeting this week, so the committee is pretty engaged, and there is a push to get this done, so thank you. Thank you, Holly. There being no questions for Holly, we'll move to the next item then. Item 2, consideration of a request to apply for a grant.
I think I'm also up for this item as well. The town submitted a pre-application for the CAMA Public Beach Access at Jacob Street. Back in the spring, we were invited to submit a final application for Jacob Street that is due on Friday. There is around $1 million available in the 20 coastal counties. The town would propose to install a ADA accessible dune crossover, as well as a parking area in South Nags Head. And that grant amount would be $122,225 that we're requesting from Division of Coastal Management, with a town contribution of about $60,000.
All right, thank you. Questions from the board? No? Okay, great. Thank you. That's something that we need to act on. And so a motion would be in order to approve the application.
So moved. Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
For this particular grant application, they did want us to at least open up to the floor for any public comments that might be available. And then
Okay.
we would have to record that into the minutes. So if we could just take a minute to do that and then act on it.
Okay. So if in line with the requirements of the grant, Robert, I'll just do this one. I will open the floor if there are any residents who wish to comment on this grant application. Seeing none, thank you very much. So now I do have a motion and a second on the floor to approve this application. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. The next item is consideration of another grant for hazards and storm recovery projects. David?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Board of Commissioners. Before you for your consideration is a grant application from the North Carolina Division of Coastal Management under their local planning and management grant for natural hazard and storm recovery projects. This grant would be utilized to assist in the town's stormwater master planning effort, which is currently ongoing, and to assist in the development of some preliminary assessments and design concepts for the remaining portions of the 13 project areas. This request is in the amount of $20,000 with a town match of up to $77,000, which encapsulate the remaining scope of work for the preliminary project assessments.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Any questions of David from the board?
Do you have to have public comment?
Do we have to have public comment for
We
this?
do not have to have
Okay.
public comment, just board approval.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, Commissioner Cahoon.
Are we proceeding with this even if we don't get the grant?
We are. We have the funds available to do so.
Just helps out.
I just want to make that part of the record.
Okay, thank you.
People are asking about what we're doing.
Yes, okay, yes. So we need to be clear that we are not.
What are we getting more What more are we getting
Through this grant application?
than what we're already doing?
20,000.
Extra 28,000.
$20,000?
Yes.
I mean, we're doing the same thing.
Yes.
We're just reducing our share by 20,000.
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay.
We can
Yeah.
use that for other projects, towards other projects.
I mean, we're not adding to something new. We're
correct.
substituting.
Correct. So to clarify, this doesn't change the scope of what we're doing, doesn't change the schedule for what we're doing, doesn't change the fact that we're going to do what we're doing. This grant is an offset of the town's cost only. It's my understanding.
That is correct.
Correct.
And we would divert the 20,000 into actual projects other than planning?
Correct.
Yes, that would be my expectation
that
as
would-
well.
I mean, if we're going to save $20,000, I'd like to see it in shovel and
Yes.
projects rather than just planning.
Right. Yes.
That
Okay.
is correct.
Understood. Thank you. All right. In that case, did we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
No. I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second to approve this grant request. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Great. Thank you very much.
All right,
Thank you,
thank you.
David. The next item is consideration of a tourism short-term grant application for multi-use path. Andy?
So this is something that was in your budget this past year and was discussed. It was also in the CIP. Actually, we are requesting to apply for a grant from the Tourism Board, a short-term restricted fund grant. We've done this for many of the projects we've already completed. For this particular project, we were trying to knock out a bigger chunk of the multi-use path south of Jockey's Ridge. This has obviously been discussed on multiple occasions with a pedestrian plan that was done previously, as well as with the Focus Technical Committee. These are high-priority projects for the town. These would serve neighborhoods that are currently do not have good access to a traffic light in order to get across the main roadway to the beach. So our goal with this was to apply for a sizable grant from the Tourism Board and then use money from our Parks and Path Fund and finance a project over five years and essentially get as much as we can for that amount of money. And so we've taken projects 2 through 7 on this list here, and we've programmed those, and we're essentially going to try and design those and put them out to bid. And if we get this grant, when we have our money already available, then we would be able to apply that to as much as we're able to build. And our highest priority sections, we're relatively assured that we can build. And you see the order of priority is listed in the table. I think that the one that would be the most questionable one would be from Danube to Epstein. That would be the lowest priority. So that would be the one that, if we didn't have the funds available, we would probably shorten that project or eliminate that one. But we'll keep the board posted as we get through the design and bidding phase. But at this point, we just want to apply for the grant in order to move forward. So we would ask for that from the board.
Okay, great. Any questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, then a motion would be in order.
Motion to apply for the grant from the Tourism Board.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the application to the Tourism Board. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Great, thank you. Excited to get those going. The next item on the agenda is the report from the Planning Board Chair. Mr. Cornwell?
Mayor, Commissioners, good morning. My report today is a continuation from the one I had last month regarding short-term rentals. Now, the Planning Board discussed STRs again at its August meeting, and although we had a draft ordinance that would require the registration process, we again discussed the question that I posed to you last month. If we're asking individuals to register short-term rentals, and these are not allowed by the ordinance in some districts, how should they be handled? The Planning Board believes that we should clearly define if and how these uses should be dealt with from the land use perspective, the zoning perspective, before the registration process begins. And by that I mean, what types of short-term rentals will we permit? In what zoning districts will they be permitted? Now, in order to answer this question, the planning board has agreed together and with staff that we need to receive feedback from the community. The planning board has asked staff to put together a draft survey as well as a plan to poll the community on this issue. We want to find out what our citizens know about STRs and what their perceptions are with regard to community and neighborhood impacts. We've discussed having the survey available online, obviously, as well as distributing it through homeowners associations and the Board of Realtors. The Board of Commissioners will receive information prepared by staff as part of our planning board packet for the next meeting. And we would certainly welcome any feedback on this approach now from you or later after staff has prepared what we requested.
All right. Thank you. Questions from the board? Commissioner Fuller?
Just, is the opportunity to go to the public going to be the basis of what you do, or is it more of an exercise? I mean, are you going to have a statistically significant, valid questionnaire, or are you just trying to get information and then all of a sudden you just get a certain group of people that you get information from and then you don't get information from other people? I mean, you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Okay.
And I think from the planning board is seven individuals who are looking at this subject in a variety of ways, if you will. And at this point, they're not comfortable with moving forward without getting some feedback from at least what we believe to be stakeholders. We'd like as much feedback as possible, and we hope that survey will reach out and get feedback from a number of citizens. If you're familiar with the OBX Voice article that came out, there was obviously a lot of comments made about what the planning board was doing, and those comments were varied, but a majority of them agreed with having some kind of regulation regarding STRs. That's the kind of feedback that we're looking for in terms of, and there's going to be both stakeholders. There's people obviously that don't want it in their community, and there are then the people who are in favor of having it and using their home however they see fit. So again, we're just not comfortable with moving forward without having some idea of what the community is looking at.
Yeah, just understanding that what you get back on that feedback might not be the community value, might be just a certain group's value.
Well, yes, agreed. We'll have to see what the total income of that is, or total response, and then and see where we go from there.
Yeah. Go ahead, Commissioner Walters. No, go ahead.
Did you say the Outer Banks home builders or the Outer Banks realtors?
I mean, the Outer Banks Realtors, because they've got the property managers available to them.
Okay. And then we have a fairly large database, people that receive our email updates on what's happening in the town. Is there any plan to use that and use Survey Monkey or something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, we've discussed that. The planning board hasn't seen what staff is proposing and how to do that. That'll happen at the next meeting.
Okay.
Commissioner Sears?
No comment.
Commissioner Cahoon? Okay.
I like the fact you're being very proactive.
Yeah. Perhaps on the survey, to keep them anonymous, but to have people identify their location of either their residence or their property that they're responding about in the survey might be helpful to make sure that we were getting a geographic and I shouldn't detail that. I should say let's see if we're getting a geographically distributed response as well. Thank you.
Will do.
Yes, Commissioner Walters, another question.
It's just a question. The Board of Realtors on property management companies obviously don't derive income from something such as Airbnb and VRBO. So from just an objectivity standpoint, I don't know how to say this with it not sounding not well. Is that a legitimate, because they're representing one segment, whereas,
Well,
do
we
you
have,
understand
we
what I'm
have two
saying?
planning board, we have two planning board members that do believe that that's a viable source of information.
If I may, I might add in, a lot of VRBO, vacation rental by owner, a lot of Airbnbs are also represented by those management companies.
I understand.
So I think some of them do receive some. I think that from a property management standpoint, what they want to ensure is that there's a level playing field.
Agreed.
That there's not, and like, for instance, that all the taxes are being paid for, that all the things that property managers are responsible for, whether it's public safety or things like that, are also being applied to the other short-term rentals that don't necessarily do those things. They don't see a level playing field. Am I being
You
correct?
are correct.
I understand. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. All right, the next item on our agenda would be old business, and this is a discussion of site buffering, buffer yards C and E. Andy?
Okay, this item came up last month when we were reviewing a site plan. The board is familiar with the buffering ordinance, and in several recent site plans the board's approved, we have deferred to an alternative buffering standard, and it seems to be what people are going towards, because the standard that's prescriptive by the ordinance is the buffer yard E, and that is a substantial buffer. It requires a 15-foot strip of the property along the main roadway to be undisturbed, and then another 10-foot behind that to be planted with 2 rows of plantings. And so in many cases, someone developing commercial property would have to set that aside. And if you're considered a high-impact use, then the rear yard would also have to be 25 feet in depth and buffered. And so that's a 50-foot swath of the property that would be removed from development from the buffering ordinance. Obviously, staff is reading and interpreting the ordinance as requiring the buffer yard E. However, years ago, I believe staff did apply the buffer yard C to some of these properties fronting the main roadway. And that's a much simpler requirement. It's a 5-foot strip, 1 row of plants, 5-foot wide strip. And so staff believes that there should be some clarity provided in the ordinance to determine exactly what the town wants to require. We are already trying to incorporate that into this focus project, into our commercial design standards, and we're going to make a recommendation as part of that. And that recommendation would take into consideration the values of having buffering, but also some of the significant commentary we got from our local business committee about visibility. And so Kelly and I have been discussing the standard, and what we were probably going to recommend is a 10-foot wide section of buffering, but possibly only with 1 row of plants being required as opposed to 2, which is the buffer yard D standard. And this being because the local business committee wanted to allow property owners to cluster plants instead of planting them in linear strips. And it was acknowledged that a 5-foot wide buffer planted with a strip really doesn't allow for enough room to cluster. And so we believe that a 10-foot wide buffer planted with 1 row of trees and shrubs, would allow for landscaping, provide some aesthetic value, and allow for the clustering. Now, it certainly wouldn't be designed to be opaque in terms of screening, but that's essentially our take on this. And as I said in the beginning, we wanted to incorporate this into the focus work, into the technical committee, and they've already reviewed that section. But we certainly would like to get your feedback on this and any comments that you have.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Board members, Commissioner Fuller.
Two questions. One, the existing ordinance I don't think works because the way we push too many pieces of vegetation in closely, by the time they reach a mature state, half of them have got to be pulled out anyway.
Right.
Because they won't live. So that doesn't work. My next question, though, is if we go with a 10-foot wide buffer, can you tell me what sort of advertising or use an owner can make of that buffer area or that open space area in terms of advertising? Like, can they go in the buffer and put Adirondack chairs?
I don't believe our ordinance has anything that would restrict that activity in the buffer. And that's also a topic that the local business committee discussed quite a bit, is the ability to do that. I know in years past, there has been different ways that's been enforced. Our ordinance doesn't speak to that specifically, as far as I'm aware. Right now they put Adirondack chairs out there. They put flags. Certainly, non-commercial flags are allowed, and there's a spacing requirement for those. So that's essentially what we have at this point.
I'm not saying which way to go. I have my preferences, but I would advise staff to develop an ordinance that's explicit about what can go in the buffer yard. I would also ask staff, as an extension of that, to look at what can go in open space.
Okay.
Requirements. Because a lot of open space areas that are required are being used commercially. And is that the intent? I'm just saying, please be specific.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Cahoon.
The local business community actually invited people in and requested that they limit what they do in the buffer yards, that they're prohibited from the right-of-way, but they limit the displays that they put out. There are some that were much more egregious than others, let's say, about how they fill their buffer yards, and it was not the local business committee's viewpoint in order to basically endorse that. While flags were permitted, there was a big question about how much, how many, and if I recall correctly, it was like, please limit what you do. Don't make it so egregious that we develop a standard that will be punitive.
Yeah, and that's where it was left. And so we sent letters and we asked for cooperation, and we got some cooperation, some better from others. And so we never did go back and adopt any kind of standard.
Right. We had some people that voluntarily, a couple in particular, really scaled it back a lot.
It sounds like the consensus of that committee would be good guidance for.
I mean, we did not endorse all the displays, but while they were there, we asked that please. It was a mixed group. It's a very varied group on the local business committee. It's pretty representative of a lot of the industry in this area. And there were some that you have a consensus that somebody's display may look nice and somebody's may look not so nice.
Right.
You have to treat everybody the same.
Yes. Yes, that's right. Yes, Commissioner Walters.
When was the ordinance originally written? It says Code 1990. Is that when this was originally written?
I don't think so. I think that there was a major readoption of the code in 1990, but a lot of the buffering standards existed prior to that, depending on the use. And so I can't say exactly when the first buffering standard. We did go back and look at some things, and we were provided with some information. The first buffering, in my recollection, was applied to specific uses, as part of the conditions of a conditional use, like a shopping center had buffering standards way before a lot of the other uses. And then I think when the town did a zoning ordinance update in possibly 1990, then it was all consolidated into the buffering section that we have today. But it used to be for specific uses. And so I'm sure buffering existed way back into the 80s.
And gas stations or another.
Gas stations.
I was just going to say that, we look vastly different than we did in the 80s or 1990. And because of development, we have so much more vegetation than we had then. I mean, we were just a blank sheet. There really weren't a whole lot of trees or vegetation anywhere. So while that standard at that point of time may have been necessary, I do think I agree. I think it's a bit much today with all the vegetation we currently have on the beach anyway. So.
And I think one of the things that we tried to do with some recent changes to the buffering ordinance is be somewhat realistic about what grows where. And so many property owners have had hard time maintaining certain types of things, especially in the beach environment. And then requiring evergreen tree species, there was always a requirement for a certain percentage of those, and we've opened it up a little bit with respect to that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Comment?
Yes.
I just
Commissioner
want to
Sears.
thank the staff for working with the business community for guidance on this, and that'll help expedite this process and come up with, like Webb said, a nice, clean, direct formula to finish this off.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you, and that's
Great.
our goal.
All right. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. The next item is new business committee reports. I'll go down the line, see if anyone has reports. Commissioner Sears?
Well, on the stormwater, as we heard already from one of the committee members, they are a little frustrated with the fact that there's not any digging or pumps being put in at this point, but staff has presented us with a scope of work that has been done. Over 50% of the survey work and the planning work is in place to start this winter on time for the first two projects. But I think the guidance from the board in making sure that we're just not digging a hole has been heard by the staff, and that has slowed down some of the process, because we don't want to just dig holes to appease the citizens. We want to actually look at resolutions for the problem and have that money that is being spent be spent wisely, so that we're not just wasting taxpayer money.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Commissioner Cahoon?
Sorry, could I make just a quick comment also on that same topic? Mr. Nunemaker, during the comment, had made a request for a moratorium. And I just want to let the board know our opinion on that is that state statute prohibits the imposition of a moratorium on residential development if the purpose of the moratorium is to develop and adopt new or amended plans or ordinances. So I would advise against consideration of a moratorium in that respect.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Commissioner Cahoon?
GovEd has met. We have a new member from the Board of Education, and we are installing more upgrades to the system for easier viewing and streaming, more YouTube videos and so forth. And I would encourage the town to decide what we're going to do with our $10,000 and go ahead and start thinking about this year how we want to apply and spend that money that's available for us as a grant.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I have a Couple of items, not so much committee reports. Every month, the mayors get together, and our last meeting was the first, I believe, since the flooding that we had that affected parts of Roanoke Island that are in the county. And it's interesting to hear the county manager, the county board chair, who's part of that group along with the other mayors, talk about their struggles with dealing with stormwater management. And they are in the place where we have been for a while now, ramping up those discussions about what they're going to do and what kind of funding they're going to use, and their discussions with DOT about many of the same kind of maintenance issues that we've been having with DOT. They are kind of in the same position that we are, is that if DOT would get the ditches and culverts cleaned once, the county would happily take over maintenance of them. And with regard to flooding, just to let you know that next Wednesday, I will be on a congressional panel in Washington talking about, I'll be talking about primarily what the town is doing with regard to stormwater. It's a panel that's really more focused on sea level rise and the broader impacts. But I have said to folks who have asked, including reporters, that we look at this at two levels. One is yes, there is a global level that planning needs to address, but the other level is you have residents with issues and they don't care what the reason is. They want their flooding problem resolved if it can be resolved in some way, and that we will continue to try to balance our response. So, Commissioner Walters?
Nothing to report.
Okay, Commissioner Fuller?
Well, I have no committee. I do want to just update the board on something. The town has approached the Tourist Bureau about the property known as the event site, and about making some sort of deal where we're just leave that site. At the last Tourist Bureau meeting, the executive committee had met on two things. One came to us, the other, which was the event site, didn't come to us. Subsequent to that, my understanding is that's because the attorneys have supposed to be getting together and work something out. And I've been in touch with the manager, and I'm not sure what's going on, but I do think it's, as an advisory thing, I believe it would be good for us at the mayoral level, again, to talk to the chairman of the Tourist Bureau to see where things are, because the full body is not seeing anything. And it's interesting, the people I talked to, not on the steering committee, but in the body, didn't even know that the town had an interest in the site.
Okay, thank you. Well, we appreciate that, and I'll take that advice, and we'll make
And you
arrangements.
had talked to the manager about the nuances of going on, because I'm seeing where there's something going on, but nothing's happening.
Okay, good. There's smoke, there's no fire yet.
Right.
So yes, thank you very much. We'll follow up on that.
And then one last thing.
Yes.
I will not be here at the next board meeting, just so everybody knows.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Let's see, the next item on the agenda would be items from the town attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. The only report I have is I've been working with Holly on the grant application with regard to the Jacob Street beach access. The site control opinion is needed, so we're in the works of getting that completed for that application.
Okay. Thank you very much. The next item would be items from the town manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to request a closed session in accordance with General Statute 143-318-11A5 to discuss the appraisals and acquisition of property at 205 West Cuddy Sark Lane, 2620 Southbridge Lane, and possible acquisition of property located at 4500 Hesperides Drive.
Okay, thank you. You've heard the request for a closed session. A motion would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion necessary? In that case, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. We'll be in closed session. Okay, the board is back in open session. Mr. Hobbs, would you report on the closed session, please?
Yes, the board during the closed session gave direction to the town manager with respect to the properties identified in the closed session motion.
Okay. Thank you very much. Before we proceed to the few remaining items on the agenda, it came to our attention that there were a couple of interns in the room, and we would like to meet you. So we ask that you be introduced. So Holly, would you take care of that, please?
Yes, today was the first day actually for our 2 interns. If you guys want to come up, this is Emma and Miriam, and they're working from the Coastal Studies field site. They're going to be working with us and helping assisting staff on legwork related to the possibly commercial recycling and looking at the fee in lieu of for the bike pass. So they're going to be helping us do the research needed to kind of forward those items. But I was going to ask if it was okay, they could share their major and maybe where they're from.
Please.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Emma Seschel. I'm from Smithfield, North Carolina. I'm in my 4th year at UNC Chapel Hill studying environmental studies. And I'm interested in waste management and recycling and environmental informatics.
Hi, my name is Miriam Conso. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm a junior at UNC Chapel Hill with a concentration in smart cities. And I'm primarily interested in environmental justice, environmental law and policy, and how that can manifest in local government.
Thank you. Great. Thank you very much. And welcome to Nags Head. Thank you. Nice to meet you. Great. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the Board of Commissioners agenda, and I will ask board members if they have any additional items to discuss at this point. Yes, Commissioner Cahoon.
One, earlier in the meeting under the consent agenda, item 5 was interlocal debris removal.
Yes.
I'd like us to still think about at some point having a local contractor to handle immediate needs, because with these type of agreements, we have to wait for people to bring equipment and different things in. Whereas if you have a contract or an agreement with a local vendor, you can get stuff done a whole lot quicker.
Yes.
So I'd like for us to please take a look at that. We've done that in the past.
Okay.
And there are situations where immediacy goes a lot better.
Was that done as a separate contract?
It was. It
Okay.
was done as a direct town contract with a local vendor.
Well, that makes sense. So, yes.
We had 2 contracts.
Okay, yes,
Dare
right.
County
The one,
had-
the major one, the big one, and then something that you could just pick up the phone and get somebody here if you needed. Oh,
That is
that's good.
correct.
Yes, okay,
That's
I
all
like
I have.
that. Thank you. Commissioner Walters?
Nothing.
Commissioner Fuller? Great, thank you very much. Under the mayor's agenda, we've sent out in the last couple of weeks a draft agenda for the retreat. And what we tried to do was to take as many of the items as we could and get them into a day. I realize it's a busy time of year, folks have plans. We filled a day with items, starting with a couple of important items, those being the discussion of commercialization of the beach, which was in part the impetus for doing this, so that we can have a full discussion of that, and also the COA and pay issues that were subsequently raised by the town manager. And have filled out that day. There were 2 items after making it a very full day and realizing we probably don't want to do a 2-day retreat at this point, that were moved, and those were a discussion of recycling, and that's in part because by the time of this retreat in September, we will not have our new bids for recycling. It would be helpful to have bids in hand and know what we're facing when we have the recycling discussion. And the second item was a discussion of the tax districts, which is probably a very full and engaged discussion by itself. And so without the ability to do them all in one day, it's my suggestion that we take those 2 items and move them to some future date, either late fall or winter sometime, when we would have the information in hand to discuss them. Question?
But before we get into the budget process.
Oh, yes, well before that. So my thought would be at least the recycling sometime shortly after we have that information in hand, that we would proceed to another, perhaps even maybe just a half-day retreat where we could get through those 2 items. Sorry, Commissioner Fuller.
First, any discussion we have about commercialization on the beach, should we have the attorney there? Because it seems like every time we start discussing it, something comes up through the attorney that blocks our desire.
Yes, and John, Mr. Leidy will be there
Rather
for
have a
that.
different attorney, someone that's more favorable to our position.
We can put out an ad.
Just somebody in their firm. And then both the discussion on the tax district and recycling require a lot of staff work prior to us, and I think I'm just picking up on what was said. A lot of that information could be developed well in advance of us meeting, and we have it for a period of time. So,
yes,
and I would like to have all that information. I don't know if we need to say what it is we need, but I know just to go into a meeting and say we're going to discuss this, then start the meeting and not have the information,
no,
it's not a good idea.
correct. And there has been some correspondence to the town manager for request for information about recycling. So if you want particular information, please, by all means, throw that request in the hat. Yes, Commissioner Walters.
So could we do those either together or separately as a workshop prior to a mid-month meeting? We've done that in the past. Later, our meetings will start at, I believe, 5 or 5:30. We could do like a workshop at 3 and then have our meeting.
That's okay with me. Is there any reservation?
It depends on what month you're looking at.
Okay, right. So it
The
would,
time when we go back to the,
Well, that starts in October, I think.
yes,
yeah, that's what I
right.
think.
So I'm not sure.
Okay,
October.
all right, then I'm seeing that that's okay. So yes, so we will do that. So thank you, board members, for that. I appreciate that. Thank you. The other item, and I'll ask for some help, this came up just this week. We have a couple of expirations, one on the Board of Adjustment and one on the Personnel Grievance Panel. Can you give me those names?
We have Jack Cooper, his term expires in October on the BOA, and Tina Adderholt, her term expires on the Personnel Grievance Panel in October also.
Okay. Does the board have any reservations? Customarily, we have asked people if they were willing to be reappointed. Does the board have any reservations about that in these cases?
Motion to reappoint.
Okay, motion to reappoint if they are willing, then, okay, yes. So since I have a motion to do that, understanding that it's contingent on their acceptance, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to reappoint those individuals subject to their willingness. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Great, thank you very much. Is there any other business to come before us, Mr. Town Manager?
No, sir.
Okay. In that case, a motion to adjourn for a closed session as indicated would be in order, and I'd ask whoever made that motion to please read it.
I'd like to make a motion to enter into closed session in accordance with GS 143-318.11A6 regarding the town manager's annual review.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. We'll be in closed session. Thank you.